last seeing you guys. I've been traveling, and got 3 kids. So summer tends to hijack some of our weekends, but it's just so good to come back home and just feel the beauty of God. You know, that song that Joanne was just singing, that it's really all about His presence. And sometimes, I know you guys you're hearing a lot of words right now, and you might think like, man, there's a lot. Like, I feel like it's a fire hose, you know, it's like, oh, so much to drink. I don't know what to do. Well, I just want to encourage you. It's not how much you know, it's who you know. And sometimes we make the relationship with God about our head, and we want to figure God out. It's not about figuring God out. It's about having faith. And so simply being in the presence of God will change you. I know a lot of you guys might come here Sunday after Sunday and you're thinking, man, I ain't as smart as this person. I just don't get theology as well as this person. I haven't read the Bible as well as this person. I didn't go to Bible school. I didn't do all this stuff. I don't have that Christian heritage or foundation. Guess what? Our foundation is really simple. It's Jesus Christ. And if you just sit at the foot of Jesus on a regular basis, what happens is He begins to transform you. You know, we talk about less of me and more of you. Really, that is the Christian walk. It's for us to not necessarily, we think of this concept when we say deny yourselves. Well, it's not that you're denying who you are. God created you in His image. And so you're valuable. We're important. But what He's saying is that deny your ability. Deny your strength. Because your strength can only get you to a certain place. Many of us have used our strength to a place where it's driven us to addiction. Our strength is only so good for so long. Willpower will run out, but His power will never run out. And that is the point of the gospel. The gospel is really this, is that ultimately, we come to a place of realizing and recognizing that I can't do this on my own, and I need you, God. And if you're in that place, and if you're sitting in that posture right now, you're in a good place. It's not about the challenge. We all got challenges in our life. I love how Eric talked about the storm. We've all got storms, and we can't predict when the storms will come. But the key point is, when the storm comes, do you know who's going to fight for you? Do you know who's going to give you the strength to endure the storms of life? Yesterday, my wife and I watched a documentary that really devastated me. I'm still trying to recover from it. But it was all about the pursuit of wealth. It was the American dream. And each character in this documentary, it's 25 years, so the beginning of their journey to wealth and stature and houses and all that stuff. And this filmmaker is coming back now 25 years later to see what's happened. And at every point is devastation. Every one of them says, this was a false idol. We pursued this idea that money could solve our problems, the prestige and all this stuff. But in the end, it's all worthless. And this guy who was a tycoon who basically made $800 million ends up in prison. Because in 2008, he decided he wanted to push a little bit more because, see, it was never enough. And at the end, he's in this little tiny prison cell in Italy. And he comes to this realization that money couldn't buy him freedom. That money couldn't buy him the love of his wife. And he says this, and he's being interviewed, and he said this. He says, anybody who thinks money is the solution to their problem has never had money. We think that's the problem. Everybody, you hear them, they go, if I just had a little bit more money, if I just had a little bit more of this, if I had a bigger house and more cars and so forth, so on, I'll be happier. But that's a lie from a pit of hell. One of the ladies who ends up becoming one of these showgirls in Las Vegas, 25 years later, her son is in it now. And she says, be careful what you ask for. She said literally this, I had sold my soul to the devil, and I can't get out. And you can tell every one of them are unhappy. I just want to encourage you today. More is not going to solve your problem. That's what addiction says to us. If you just consume more, somehow along the way, the challenges of life will just evaporate, but they won't. My sermon this morning for you guys is titled Relook. It's not as hard as it seems. How many of you have a hard time finding stuff in the fridge? I set you up. I do. My wife tells me it's in the fridge. I go in the fridge. I look at it. I scan. And I'm like, I'm so sorry, babe, but it's not there. And she said, can you go look again? I'm like, really? What's the point? I can't see it. And funny enough, every time she says this, are you looking with your man's eyes? I'm like, I don't know. I guess. I'm a man? Yes, I am. But this is a quick question, though. Here's the moral of the story. Many of us look, but never actually see. Jesus said this about his disciples. He says, you're forever seeing, but never perceiving. I'm in a household of French. My wife's French. My kids are French. My in-laws are French. I seem like I'm surrounded by French. And I know why, because it's the sins of my past. I always made fun of the French. I always thought to myself, the French were just cheesy. My grade 9 French teacher, Monsieur Roy, I just did not like him. I disdained him with every ounce because he just made a fool of us. You know, I couldn't say the words. I just didn't like anything French, really. And I always made fun of the French. And here I am now in a household of French. I have this story. I always tell people that, you know, we immigrated all the way from Canada, and I finally, after years, became Canadian. I'm as Canadian as they can be. And then all of a sudden, I get married into a French-Canadian household. And now I sit at a dinner table or breakfast, and I don't know what's happening. Half of the times, I'm like, what are they saying? What in the world are you guys talking about? It's just, you know, I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, my gosh, I'm an immigrant again. And it's just, with God, it's amazing how it works. But the point is this, is that, and the question I want to ask you today is, are you seeing your situation and your condition with your eyes, or are you looking at it with God's perspective? I really believe this. The only way we can see is to relook again from a different vantage point. Here's a question I want to ask you. What areas in your walk with God that you need to revisit or relook at again? Definition of relook is very simple. It's a second or additional look. It's really a paradigm shift. Sometimes we look at something in a certain way and we go, there's no hope. And so we need to have a paradigm shift. And a paradigm shift allows us to look at it from a completely different angle that gives us a completely different perspective. So what we deem to be hopeless, all of a sudden we see the opportunity. Or where we see judgment. Have you ever judged somebody because you only saw a certain vantage point? There's a story about a man of God. He's on the train and he sees this woman and she's with a bunch of kids and they're all her children and they're just ruckus. They're making noise and so forth, so on. And he's thinking in the back of his mind, this woman's a really bad parent. So he's mustering up the courage to go up there and talk to the woman and say, hey, can you just discipline your children? So finally he musters up the energy, goes up to her and he says, ma'am, he says, there's a lot of people on this train. Is it possible that you can keep your children quiet? And the woman says, I'm so sorry, but we just came back from the hospital and their father passed away. In that moment, that man of God had a perspective change. Where there was judgment, all of a sudden there was compassion. How many of us have judged things because we only see it through our vantage point? How many times have we judged ourselves because we've seen ourselves from our own perspective? I suck. I ain't good enough. But God is saying to us, relook again. Relook at your life from my vantage point because I died for you, so you are valuable. You don't suck. Today, I just want to ask you to relook again. Maybe it's a failed relationship. Maybe you tried to learn something new and didn't go so well, or it could be school, it could be a business endeavor that did not go well. Maybe you went to rehab and decided it's never going to work for you. Do you see yourself and others as hopeless, disabled, useless? See, the words we use describe not only who we are, but also it defines the lens we see the world through. In ancient times, the Greeks and the Romans would not use a curse word because of the fear of it coming to pass. In our culture today, we drop curse words as if they're just another word. But the words we speak design the life that we live because they actually become the lens in the way we engage with the world. So what do we do when we're confronted with adversity? Do we give up and wish the problem goes away, or do we see it from our reality, or do we decide to have heaven's perspective? So what God has been saying to me is, Joe, you're not what you see, but what God sees. God's heart is that you give it an additional look before you give up on it. The Bible is a book of second chances. Heck, that is what grace is about. When Adam and Eve sinned, God didn't immediately say, okay, well, too bad. But guess what he did? He immediately began the process of bringing them back into relationship. He came up with a plan to redeem us. The situation was bleak. It was hopeless. But God decided to relook at the situation from a different perspective and saw the opportunity in the adversity. I'm going to read Mark 6:35, 44. I know Pastor John shared about confessing and the fact that we just eventually go, well, this is enough. This is my lot in life, and we don't expect the more from God. And I think Pastor John told me the impact that message had. And what I want to do today is I just want you to kind of just put another stepping stone on it to remind you the importance of relooking. And we're going to look at Mark 6:35, 44. And it says this, when it was already quite late, his disciples came to him and said, this place is desolate and it's already quite late. Send them away so that they may go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. But he answered them, you give them something to eat. And they said to him, shall we go and spend 200 denarii on bread and give them something to eat? And he said to them, how many loaves do you have? Go look. When they found out, they said 5 and 2 fishes. 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And he commanded them all to sit down by groups on the green grass. They sat down. Sorry. What's going on here? Okay. They sat down, groups of hundreds and fifties. And he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. And looking up towards heaven, he blessed the food and broke the loaves, and he kept giving them to the disciples to set before them. And he divided up the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied. And they picked up 12 full baskets of broken pieces and also of fish. There were 5,000 men who ate the loaves. Reality actually is the feeding of 25,000, because in those days, unfortunately, they didn't count women and children, sadly enough. So they were only counting the men. So this is a massive, massive miracle. It's the only miracle that we see in all 4 Gospels. So God is saying to us, this is really important. And this is what I extracted from it. First one is, in the face of adversity lies the opportunity. See, in Verse 35 says, when it was already quite late, his disciples came to him and said, this place is desolate, it's already quite late. Send them away so that they may go into the surrounding countryside, villages, and buy themselves something to eat. The disciples looked at the situation through their eyes and came up with a sensible solution. How many sensible solutions do you have? The sensible solution is, listen, it's getting dark and it's late, send them away. But God doesn't like sensible solutions. He doesn't care that it's getting dark. He doesn't care that it's a desolate place. He doesn't care about any of that stuff. The solution seems sensible, but in reality, all they wanted to do was get rid of the problem because it was too big. How many of us are confronted with a problem that's so big, all we want is for the problem to go away? But God is like, no, no, no. You see, I'm not the God who takes away problems. I'm the God who provides my grace, my power in your problem. See, this is the relationship we have with God, and my kids are like that. My kids want me to rescue them at all times. But if I'm a good parent, what I have to do is I have to parent them from a place of saying, no, you got this. But I'm scared I'm going to fall. No, you got this. And this is how you grow. And this is how you grow in the Spirit. This is how you go in your relationship with God. This is how we grow in life. It's not by being rescued. Millennials, a generation of kids who've been rescued. And look what we've created. We've created kids who can't even go to universities. I just read an article recently where they basically, the professors are sending kids back home because these kids are not prepared for universities. They're not adults because mom and dad have been protecting them all their lives, and all of a sudden now they're in university where they can fend for themselves, and they can't handle it. And so it sounds callous sometimes. It sounds really callous for God to just say, no. See, when we see adversity and not the opportunity, we always want the problem to go away. So the question is, how many of us right now are confronted with a big problem and simply want it to go away? I'm going to tell you this right now. It's not going to go away. You turning your back on the problem is not going away. You deciding not to address your addiction is not going to go away. Whether it's a relationship that's failed, if you don't do something about it, it's just not going to go away. So that's the first thing. There is opportunity in the adversity. That's what I'm learning. And the second component is Jesus wants us to take ownership of the problem. This is crazy, isn't it? That God actually believes in us. He thinks we can do it. We can handle it. He wants to take ownership. And look what he says to them. But he answered them, you give them something to eat. They're like, what are you, crazy? We just told you. We're in a remote place. It's getting dark. There's 25,000 people. We were just like these dudes who were fishing. And then you said, hey, you want to come follow us? And we're like, yeah, sure. And all of a sudden you want us to feed 25,000 people? It is utterly ludicrous for God to make that statement. But he's like, you feed them. You take ownership. And so, of course, they take ownership, and I love their response. And they said to him, shall we go and spend 200 denarii on bread and give them something to eat? Oh, this is so good. See, the first thing that we do is we look at our bank accounts. And when we go, God, like, do you want me to take money and give it to them? No, that's not enough. What God is asking you to do, you don't got enough. You just can't do it. We think it's based on us and our abilities and all that stuff. And this is why the American dream, the Canadian dream, that's what we're sold, is when I make it, then I'm going to help somebody. You ever hear somebody always say that? When I make my first million, you know, what? No, you're never going to do that. Because you're going to start worshiping the idol of money. If you don't start now, you'll never do it when you have it. And so the point is this, is that you got to start thinking that you already have it. It's not about your ability. I think we make it so much about ourselves, don't we? Our relationship, our conversations is always about what? I don't got enough. Man, I wish I had this. I wish I was that. But God is like, no, 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 you don't get it. You take ownership, but this is how you take ownership. And he said to them, how many loaves do you have? Go look. And when they found out, they said 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Oh, I love this. What's in your hands? And they looked at them, and it's funny, in the other Gospels, when you read it, it's a little kid's lunch. They're stealing lunch from a little kid. That's all there's left. After 3 days of revival meetings with Jesus in this desolate place, that's all there's left. That's all they could come. This is the little that we have, God. Go look. So this is what I want you to do today, and this is what I need to do today, is I need to look what's in my hands, what's in front of you. Like we think that, no, God, no, what is it that you have? Because the little that you have, when you bring it to God, guess what happens? Miracle. We want the problem to go away, but Jesus wants us to exercise authority. All Jesus wanted to do with bringing what they had to the table so that they could bring what he had to the table. You bring what you got to the table, and Jesus is going to bring what he's got on the table. You plus Jesus, dangerous. David against Goliath, 5 stones. That's all he brought to a sword fight. Rocks. Gideon, this little guy, scared, hiding. He's like, no, I don't. He's like, he wanted I don't know how many different signs before he actually obeyed. But God's just like, come on. Just bring your fear. You can bring your fear to God. Isn't that crazy? He was so afraid. He was so timid. He wanted not one evidence that God would be with him, not 2, 3 times. On and on and on it goes. So, the guy killed Christians for a living. He's a legalist, and that's what he brought. He didn't bring his stature. He didn't bring his degrees. God wants to add to the little that we have. This is what I'm learning, is that faith is not denying the reality of our situation, but it's bringing our reality to God with the expectation that God will add to it. The little that you have, you bring it, God's going to do something incredible. This place is a miracle. It's a place where John and Vicky brought the little that they had and just simply offered it to God. And there you are. I'm pretty sure if you told John at the beginning of the journey that this is what God was going to do, he said, I don't know. How is that going to be possible? That's not our job. That's God's job. The last point that I want to make with you guys is prepare for the opportunity. Are you preparing for the miracles in your life? How do we prepare for it? And this is what Jesus does. Okay, so now he's setting the table up for the big miracle. He's commanded them all to sit down by groups on the green grass. They sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties. And he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up towards heaven, he blessed the food and broke the loaves and kept giving it to the disciples to set before them. Jesus says to them, okay, before there's the miracle, I need to prepare people, organize them, set them up. The people will probably think they're crazy. Why are we sitting in groups? Well, I bet you all kinds of murmuring, complaining, because no one sees anything before the miracle. But the disciples simply did what God had asked them. They didn't know what was going to happen. And this is the cool part of it. Think about it. He said, you feed them. So what was their job? Their job was to prepare, to set the table. We do this at home all the time. We tell the kids don't cook the dinner, but we get them to set the table. See, the onus, the responsibility, the pressure is not on us, it's on Jesus to make the miracle happen. Not on us. I can't make a miracle happen. There's no way I can make anything happen. But what I can surely do is set the table for God. So how are you setting the table in your life for God to come and invade? That's the act of faith. I really believe the greatest act of faith is preparation. There's a story in 2 Kings 3:9-20. And I'm just going to read it really quickly because I know You guys need to go eat. The king of Israel, the king of Judah, and the king of Edom started out in what proved to be a looping detour. After 7 days, they had run out of water for both army and animals. The king of Israel said, "Bad news, God has gotten us 3 kings out here to dump us into the hand of Moab." But Jehoshaphat said, "Isn't there a prophet of God anywhere around through whom we can consult God?" One of the servants of the king of Israel said, "Elisha, son of Shaphat, is around somewhere." The one was Elijah's right-hand man. Jehoshaphat said, "Good, a man we can trust." So the 3 of them, the king of Israel, Jehoshaphat, and the king of Edom, went to meet him. Elisha addressed the king of Israel, What do you and I have in common? Go consult the puppet prophets of your father and mother." "Never," said the king of Israel. "If God, who has gotten us into this mix, dumping all 3 of us kings in the hand of Moab." Elisha said, As God of the angel armies lives, and before whom I stand ready to serve, if I wasn't for the respect I have for Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, I wouldn't give you the time of day. But considering this, bring me a minstrel. When a minstrel played, the power of God came on Elisha. And he said then, God's word, dig ditches all over the valley. Here's what will happen. You won't hear the wind, you won't see the rain, but the valley is going to fill up with water, and your army and your animals will drink their fill. This is easy for God to do. He will also hand over Moab to you. You will ravage the country, knock out the fornicators, level the key villages, clear out the orchards, so forth, so on. In the morning, it was the hour of the morning sacrifice. The water had arrived, water pouring in from the west, from Edom. A flash flood, flinging the valley with water, digging ditches in preparation for God's blessing. Here's the lesson. We can't control the outcome, but we can control our performance in relationship to what God has said to us. You got to dig the ditches. And what I'm learning about when we're in a situation of great need, when you're in a desperate situation, a great need can be a good thing if it leads you to a deeper dependency on God. So when you're stuck in the pursuit of the greater things, there will come a time in your life where everything you thought you could do doesn't happen. So the problem lies not knowing how to dream big. We all know how to dream big. My goodness, everybody here has a big dream. But the problem that we all have is we don't know how to start small. We all want the big things. And that was the documentary that I watched yesterday. Everybody wants the big house. Everybody wants the big cars. Everybody wants a shortcut. Lord spoke to me a couple of mornings ago when I was going to the gym. And I was so tired. I drove past my exit, and I was all the way out on Blair Road. And I'm like, how did I get there? And as I was coming back, I was late. And I was like, I just want to get to the gym. And I'm on the highway, and I can see the gym right there. And I was thinking to myself, man, it would have been so much more easier if I could just drive my car through the bushes and through the fence, because the distance is really short. But no, I had to go all the way up and detour. The Lord spoke to me right there and then. He said, a shortcut is not a shortcut. It never is. It never is a shortcut. A shortcut is always the long way. God's way is the shortcut. Many of us, how many of us have taken shortcuts in our lives? And where did we end up 30 years later? Addicted, lost, and desperate. We lose the little that we have in order to gain the big that we have. That's the American dream, gambling our lives. But God is like, no, you got to start small. Enjoy the little that you have. Revelation 3:6, I think it is, or 9. Jesus is commanding the church of Philadelphia. So there's these 7 churches that God has written a letter to. And they're not good letters. But Philadelphia gets a really good letter. They get God saying to them, you guys are doing really well. And they're like the tiniest church in the entire Asia, whatever area. They're like the tiniest, the least influential. They don't have many resources. And Jesus says this to them. He commands them. He says, I like you. You're doing well. because you are weak. You haven't denied my word, and you believe me. Isn't that crazy? Because the Bible is about what? It's the story of God doing incredible things through the weak things. If you're too strong, God can't do anything through you. But if you're weak, oh, can He do some incredible works in your life? Don't try to be the strongest person, the smartest person. No, that's not what the kingdom is about. It's about you just bringing what little you have and believing God. So start digging ditches in preparation for what God's going to do. I really believe this. God is not your shortcut. I've learned that you know what God is? This is your solution. Everybody thinks that we want to use God. How many of us use God? I've used God for so many things, just so I can get the bigger things. I'm learning Christianity in many ways in North America is about using God so that we can get stuff. The prosperity gospel, all the stuff that's out there, so that, oh, look at me. But God doesn't want to be used. He's not a puppet. He wants to be our solution. Otherwise, it's idolatry. I really believe the great things, the desires are good. They're the things that drive us to God. Because God will put a dream in your heart that's so big that you can't accomplish it. And the only way you can accomplish it is by going to God. My wife is constantly, in the last few months, have been really challenging for her. Because it's like, here we are in this dream of God. And you're like, how's that possible? And so you put the pressure on yourself and you go into a place of depression because you're like, man, it's never going to happen. Why is God giving me a dream for this and that, and if it's never going to happen? And we put it on ourselves. And all God says is, hey, start small. What are you doing? Leave the miracles up to me. Miracles are not magic tricks. Faith is not a lottery ticket. I really believe this. Faith is actually an order. God gives us an order. And I believe our order for this church, for our lives, is to simply dig ditches. Go home and start digging ditches. Not literally, hopefully not. But we're in areas of your life where you're preparing for God to show up. And it might be a relationship where you're thinking it's impossible. We'll start digging ditches and preparing for that miracle. Do the part that you need to do. Work on yourself. So many people want to be married, but then they don't do the work. That's preparation for marriage. So many people want to start business, but they don't do the work. They don't prepare for it. They think God just, and I remember I've told you guys this story, but it's so funny. When I was a young adult pastor, this young kid came up to me and he said, oh, I know what I'm going to be. And I said, what? He goes, I'm going to be the next Justin Bieber. I was like, whoa, that's pretty big. Okay, cool, whatever. And I said, so do you know how to play the guitar? He says, no. You're practicing? No. What are you doing? He says that God is going to divinely inspire him to be able to start playing the guitar. And I didn't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I needed to save this kid. And I said, sorry, son, but it's never going to happen. So I got him some guitar lessons. I remember. And guess how long that season of guitar lessons lasted? Not even a month. It was too hard. The point is this, is that the preparation is really difficult. I can tell you tons of stories, but yeah, a few days ago I was at a restaurant and I walked in and I was like, wow, this is the coolest restaurant. I said, I was here 2 years ago when you guys opened up. And she said, I'm sorry, but we opened. That moment God hit me and I said, wow, I only see the outcome. I see now. I came 2 years ago when it became popular and well known. But for 13 years they toiled to build this thing. Now everybody is coming. And the point is this, is that overnight success requires years and years of preparation. And I just want to encourage you today, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. And you shouldn't expect life to be easy. But prepare for God to show up big in your life. I don't know when. I don't know how. But when God shows up, you won't even have any words. you'll just sit there and go, God, thank you so much for today. Thank you for your blessing. Thank you for your goodness. And I just pray, Father, today that you can help us to relook at the things in our lives where we see adversity, where we see hopelessness, where we see even just desolation, that you would begin to give us your perspective and help us, God, to bring the little that we have and offer it to you, because we know that when we look to heaven, something special happens. And so, God, we bring every need, every problem, every trial, every win to you today. And we believe, God, that you will take that and multiply it, because you're the one who adds to our lives. And I'd rather have what you add rather than what I birth. And I pray this in your name. Amen.